Hey, it's Turu here with some thoughts on intuition. I want to talk about what I think intuition is just as its own thing, and then get into how I think intuition differs between the extroverted intuitive and the introverted intuitive types. The general understanding of intuition is to know something without knowing how you know. If you know how you know something, then it's not intuition that's perceived this knowledge. It's sensation combined with thinking and or feeling that's figured something out. So intuition is knowing something without knowing how you know, without conscious reasoning, without figuring anything out. You simply just know something. Jung said, intuition is a perception by ways or means of the unconscious. He said it is a perception by intermediate links, and you can get the result of that whole chain from the associations. What this says to me is that intuition is a subconscious or unconscious connecting of information together, which presents itself in its final form within your mind. You just know something, but you don't know how you know, as you weren't consciously aware of the associations that your mind has been making. You aren't aware of all of the links that make up the chain, you just get the end result, and it comes by way of a perception in your mind. It's possible to go backwards. It is possible to understand how you knew what you know. It's possible to retrace these steps. My thoughts here is that when an intuitive perception appears, it's happening because intuition has managed to break free of thinking, feeling, and sensation. I think it makes sense that thinking, feeling, and sensation all work together to actually create the intuition in the first place. Look at it like this. Sensation gathers sensory data from the outer world, and on a level beyond your conscious awareness, your thinking makes sense of this data. It sorts out what the information actually is, it identifies it, and it categorizes it. Your feeling decides whether what you're thinking is made sense of is something you actually like or dislike. All of that happens without you actually knowing or realizing it's going on. And then intuition grabs a hold of this information that is really a feeling value judgment that's been informed by thinking's identification of sensations, perceptions, and turns it into something that you can actually see and observe in your mind. Since you don't know how this intuitive perception got there, it's intuition. It's knowing something without knowing how you know. I'm sure there are other explanations for how the intuitive perception got into your mind, but what I outlined is just how I see it happening. So what this intuitive perception is then, is actually a possibility, not a tangible reality. At least not yet. Maybe it never will be, but it's possible. It's a possibility. It's a very different possibility to the ones that you can brainstorm. Those are just straight up thinking. I think it's pretty obvious how they differ. Intuitive possibilities come from your unconscious, brainstormed possibilities come from your conscious thinking. Throughout all of psychological types and throughout everything I know of the MBTI, what's at the center is a tension between opposites, opposing positions. Introversion has extroversion, sensation has intuition, thinking has feeling, and judging has perceiving if we're looking at it from the MBTI perspective. So what this suggests then is that where thinking categorizes and makes sense of information, it also determines what information doesn't make sense and what information cannot be categorized. Where feeling determines what is liked or disliked, it also determines what is not liked or what's not disliked. Where sensation perceives what currently is, it also perceives what's not. For example, if you look up at a bright blue sky, sensation also perceives that you're not looking up at a dark starry sky. Following this train of thought, where intuition perceives possibilities, it's also perceiving impossibilities. Due to the nature of intuitive perceptions, them being formed in the mind, them not being tangible, them not being bound by the laws of reason a la thinking and feeling, intuition is actually the only function that's able to unite possibilities and impossibilities into a singular perception. This is how intuition is able to synthesize information together. This is where intuition is able to shine. It can simply perceive the correct path or paths forward in an instant, because it's able to blitz through possibilities and impossibilities at an incredible pace on a subconscious or unconscious level, and provide the end result to your conscious mind by way of intuitive perception. Okay, so now that I've spoken a bit about how intuition is pretty much just knowing something without knowing how we know, and I've offered a couple of my thoughts on how that might come about, though I'm aware there'll be countless other possibilities to consider as well, I'd like to shift to how intuition differs between the introverted and extroverted attitudes. The difference is literally just introversion and extroversion, but I'll get into it a little bit more. Introversion is a flow of libido from the outside in, and extroversion is the opposite. It's a flow of libido from the inside out. Introversion, therefore, places a higher priority on the subject itself, whereas extroversion places a higher priority on external information, the objects, etc., in the outer world. So it's just a matter of an orientation towards the inner world or the outer world, really. Introverted intuition is inner world intuition. What this means is that the intuitive perceptions the introverted intuitive type will have are going to be derived from their own life experience thus far. They're going to be a result of information that's already been synthesized previously. It's going to manifest as pattern recognition. An example might be that over the course of the person's life, they'll have seen things that are similar. These likely won't be observed on a conscious level if the introverted type is too pronounced, and these similarities will manifest as intuitive perceptions when the person's unconscious is basically playing snap with reality. The introverted intuitive type will get an intuition about someone or something, and it'll be spawning from these patterns that have been in formulation for the duration of their life, and arguably before their life, as they draw from the collective unconscious and what is to them essentially common knowledge of sorts. These patterns can be viewed as meanings. The introverted intuitive type is constantly on the prowl for the meaning of things, the symbolism of everything. That's what the patterns turn into. That's what the patterns are building, meanings. As we're talking about the introverted intuitive type, this means we're talking about synthesizing patterns and meanings, so combining this with what was said earlier about intuition dealing with possibilities and impossibilities, introverted intuitive types lean more towards shutting out impossibilities. Shutting out impossibilities means the introverted intuitive type is more able to get a grasp of what is possible, what could be realistic, what could be the truth, what the real meaning of anything is, what's really behind the curtain. They close possibilities out more than they let them in. For the introverted intuitive type, the intermediate links that create the chain are found within the inner world. These then get projected onto objects in the outer world. The subjective self is placed as a higher priority than anything in the outer world, which is why the introverted intuitive is projecting their intuitive pattern recognition onto it. They're projecting their truths or their meanings. The extroverted intuitive type, on the other hand, is outer world intuition. This means the intuitive perceptions the extroverted intuitive type will have are going to be derived from the outer world, from current happenings. They're not projections of patterns that have been recognized and assimilated over time. Instead, they're sourced from the external world. In contrast to the introverted intuitive type, extroverted intuitive types are therefore looking to let possibilities in. They're expanding out into the outer world. They're more attuned to perceiving as many intuitive perceptions as they possibly can. This is why they have that what if shtick. It makes sense for them to have it as well. If you look at extroverted intuitive types as the types of people to be constantly asking what if of everything, then you'll have a decent perspective of what they're about. They're about expanding out. They want more and more possibilities to be presented to them, so much so that they can actually have a really difficult time shutting out impossibilities. Their intuitions spawn from the outer world. The links in the chain are found outside themselves for the extroverted intuitive. The end result still manifests itself within the extroverted intuitive's mind as an intuitive perception, of course, but these intuitive perceptions are not being born from the person's own experience in life thus far. This is because extroversion places a higher priority on the outer world than it does on the subject themselves. The person isn't as valuable as objects outside themselves according to extroversion, so intuition here is then being inspired by what they're observing. Examples of this might be to see someone as you're walking up the street, but you're seeing them in your mind as just having a gigantic head. They of course don't have a comically sized head, but the extroverted intuitive type just sees these things. They just see the possibilities. Due to their intuition being sourced from the outer world, essentially, they're far better at being able to communicate their intuition with other people as well, because they can explain where it's coming from better. They can point to the person on the street, for example, and they can say that they see them with a ridiculously large head. The outer world focus of intuition makes extroverted intuitive types far more understandable more relatable than introverted intuitive types, as the introverted intuitive types often don't have any idea where their intuitive perceptions are actually spawning from. Identifying the source of the intuition is far easier when it's coming from the literal external environment. Where introverted intuition might be creating a singular truth or meaning in the person's inner world, extroverted intuition is perceiving many truths, many meanings from things derived in the outer world. I'd like to mention here that due to how intuition works, perceiving both possibilities and impossibilities, intuitive types often run the risk of being hypocrites. They can be seen as people that contradict themselves a lot. The reason isn't anything malicious, and it isn't because they're actually a hypocrite. It's because they're able to perceive multiple perspectives at the same time. Where a sensation type might see things in terms of what is or isn't, where thinking types might see the world in terms of what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, where feeling types might see the world in terms of what they like and what they dislike, intuitive types see the world in terms of possibilities and impossibilities, and unlike the other types, they can hold intuitive perceptions of both in their mind at once. This is because intuition is an irrational function. It's not bound by the laws of reason. What makes sense doesn't matter. What's agreeable or disagreeable doesn't matter. What can physically and tangibly be observed at the same time, such as feeling both hot and cold, doesn't matter. Intuition bypasses these restrictions, and intuitive types can be seen as hypocrites because of their ability to have multiple opinions on the same thing just because of how intuition works. As always, this is all just my opinion, just my thoughts on everything. I hope this has helped shed some light on intuition for you. If not, that's cool too. If you enjoyed this video or learned something from it, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. If there's anything you'd like me to talk about, drop a comment in the comment section below. Cheerio out. See you later.